Hi you guys. You can all hear. I think I'm on this mic, so that's cool. Yeah, how's it going? I just was just asking Jeff there what the sort of audience was, and I think it's a split between small and large businesses, which is great. And what I wanted to do, because it's the start of the day, and you're going to sort of drill down into all those great sessions later on, is just take a very, very sort of high view of where the industry's at and where we're moving towards. I started Simply Zesty in 2009 because I could see from, I was using Facebook and Twitter and tools like that in about 2007 and sort of saw what was coming. So I kind of want to do the same now because we understand all those tools and we're all using them to see where maybe we're going to in the future. So the title that I have of the presentation today is The Attack on Grafton Street, which is a bit of a dramatic title. But what I wanted to do as we delve down further is I think we're living in a time of massive disruption at the moment. So technology is creating huge change. You're probably seeing it in all your businesses and your personal lives and how you consume media, etc. So we're going to look at Grafton Street as an example and see how some of the businesses on that street are being impacted over the next sort of half an hour. Just to touch very quickly on where we're at the moment and what's happening. I think it's pretty widely accepted that Facebook, for example, is a massive tool out there. There's 1 billion people using it. There's 700 million people using it on their mobile. So what you've seen is a huge influx of brands and businesses and all of you guys jumping on Facebook and starting to reach consumers. And that's fantastic, really, really useful. But it's a tiny little piece of the mix. So what I want to try and sort of move people away from today is, you're not just going onto a Facebook page and trying to get loads of likes. That's great. It's one of the things you do, but it's a tiny little part of the mix. If you're in retail, you've started seeing tools like Pinterest. So it's a very female-orientated social network where people are starting to pin all the stuff that they're like and really curating lots of content. And obviously, we're seeing the sort of tools like Instagram where people are using their mobiles a lot more to take photos. And that's a very good example. The reason I've got it there today is just touching on this theme of disruption. So you probably all know a company called Kodak who are around for decades, really, really successful. They went bankrupt recently. And all they were able to do was sell their patents. So they had a few patents left over from the various stuff that they'd done, and they were able to sell those for about $1 billion just to sort of get rid of some of their debts. Instagram, which it's not Kodak, but it's very, very similar. They set up, and within sort of less than 600 days, they were able to sell their company to Facebook for $1 billion. And the reason those two things were happening at the very same time, the reason for that is the mobile or the smartphone that you've got in your pocket being very, very disruptive. Twitter is obviously a very important part of the mix. And I just find it's very, very interesting. I think the adoption of Twitter is really sort of ramping up at the moment. And it started off as something very simple. People don't realize that it's really just text messaging that you sort of broadcast out to a group of people. It's that simple. But because they're a very large company with a lot of sort of venture capital behind them, they obviously are now moving into a phase where they have to make a lot of money. So just like Facebook transitioned into that phase, that's what you're starting to see with Twitter at the moment. So you'll probably see a lot of rich media coming into your Twitter streams. So if you look at, that's a normal tweet there on the left. It's Harvey's Furniture. And that's how you all sort of see tweets. But if you look on the right-hand side, this is where we're moving towards. So this is an actual tweet, even though it's massive. It's got a picture in there. It's got the price. It's got a review. And it's got a little bit of blurb about the product. So these are called cards. You'll be seeing an awful lot more of those. It's very, very early stage for Twitter, but they're starting to try and monetize it. And because the audience is very engaged and you've got a following there, it's something that you might be looking into. So I was over at Facebook in San Francisco recently, and it's very interesting to sort of hear how they think of the sort of mission that they're on. So they were thinking about it for a very high level. So people think of Facebook as this little website that you log into and you share photos with your friends and stuff like that, and like stuff and all the stuff that you do on Facebook. It's an awful lot more. It's kind of like the social plumbing of the entire internet. So if you think of think of it as a set of highways that connects the internet together. Obviously, Google is most of us think of, if you ask most Irish people what is the internet, it's Google. That's what they think it is. And just this week, there's stats released that saying that 25% of all web traffic is coming through Google. But looking at it from a social perspective, which is my interest, Facebook is really the highways that connect all the different parts of the internet socially. So it's all the nice stuff that you share with your friends. And if you think of it from a retail perspective, maybe the companies that are doing it really well are the sort of in the malls on the corner of this highway. So one example that is a brilliant example, I think, if any of you are in retail, is Fab. So yes, they've got the nice Facebook page where you go and you like it and they show off products, but their entire website is built with Facebook integration in there. So you can log in with Facebook, it shares products automatically, it'll suggest products for you based on what your friends like, etc. So other companies that are doing this well with Facebook are the likes of Spotify for music, the likes of Netflix, and what they're able to do is leverage those billion people and grow exponentially. So you need developers in-house for that. You need to take Facebook to the next level, but it's very, very powerful. So that's just a very, very quick view of the stuff that's going on that I think that's important at the moment. But what I wanted to look at was the future. So obviously, the phone. This changed everything. The iPhone in 2007, I think it was, which incredibly is that's 6 years ago now that we're all walking around with iPhones. And recently, I personally think that the iPhone's sort of starting to wane a bit, and people might disagree, but I now use Android. So there's two really clear platforms. And what that's done is it's created this huge ecosystem. So we're now all very familiar with the concept of an app. We all use our smartphones as a second screen when we're watching television. And it's one of the main places where we go to find information and research when we're going to buy something. So the smartphone has changed absolutely everything. We're moving, there's not even a point of giving you statistics about the amount of smartphones in Ireland. By the end of the year, pretty much everybody who matters is going to have a smartphone. So very, very important. And then obviously an extension of that is the tablet. So the iPad is pretty much the biggest player in the game. Yesterday, Apple released their earnings results. 84% of tablet traffic is on an iPad. So I would be of the opinion that pretty much that's all that really matters. The iPad's very usable. Unlike mobile, Android hasn't really caught up there yet. So iPad is where I'd be concentrating if you're interested in tablets. So moving back to this analogy of Grafton Street, and it's just this huge, huge time of disruption. So I personally believe that if you're a business on that street or any main high street at the moment, you're probably not in danger, that's the wrong word, but you need to be very aware of the huge technological change that's out there at the moment. So the most obvious example, everybody's read about it in recent months or weeks, is HMV. So that's a very clear example, and they were quick to come out and say that it was upward-only rents and that lots of business factors. Absolutely not. They have been decimated by services like Spotify. So if I can go out and sign up to Spotify and pay $10 a month for pretty much any song in the world, of course I'm going to do that instead of walking in and buying a physical CD for a tenner. So that's one factor that's disrupted them. Second factor is services like Netflix. Even hands up how many people are using Netflix in this room. So that's half the room. If I'd have asked that a year ago or 2 years ago, nobody would even have heard of Netflix. So that just shows you where a service can come out of and how quickly it can spread and disrupt your business. So nobody's going in, or they're certainly buying the odd box set or movies, but most people are streaming stuff online or getting their content from different places. So HMV, from being in a very strong position 3 or 4 years ago, have been decimated by two services out there and copies of those services. The book industry, obviously, very, very challenging. This chart fascinates me. This is a guy called Jeff Bezos who is the CEO of Amazon, and the yellow line is the amount of physical books sold, So that's books that Amazon have been selling. And don't forget, Amazon are one of the most successful companies on the internet ever. And that yellow line is absolutely exponential growth. That's doubling year on year, really, really successful. But you can see that the red line, that's 2008, 2009. That's when they started selling Kindle books. And you can see that that's a graph and a whole different trajectory. So that's the sort of disruption that digital is causing. It doesn't mean that physical book sales are dead. You can see they're still growing. But the fact that you can get them on your Kindle and that everybody has e-book readers on their phones and tablets, etc., is very, very disruptive. Now, what you're seeing in bookstores, especially in the likes of the States and more and more here, is people are having to create an experience. So there has to be a reason to go into the shop. You can't just stand there and say, right, we're not going to sell any more books. Everybody's buying them online. It's moving to more maybe, a cafe culture, or there has to be an additional reason to get people into the shop. So that's the book industry. So that's two. They're both media related. The next one is, anybody here, hands up if you use WhatsApp? Wow, that's more than I thought. So I would have thought WhatsApp is all sort of under 25. It's actually nearly everybody here, or half the room here. So WhatsApp is massively, massively disruptive. If you are Vodafone, if you're O2, if you're Meteor, 3, any of those companies up and down Grafton Street, you have seen your text messages just going like this. They've just absolutely fallen off a cliff. The good old days of paying 10 or 20 cents for a text message to somebody, which apparently was one of the closest things to pure profit ever, those days are gone. So you can now send free text messages, free pictures, all that sort of stuff. And Vodafone and O2 and those sort of companies are having to adapt very, very quickly and offer new products and services. But for them to see something like this come along that was started by 4 guys in a garage and is obviously now grown up into a company with that valuation of a couple of billion, but for them to see that come out of nowhere and decimate their text message businesses is very, very scary. Even if you look at businesses like banks, so banks here have been slightly more under pressure because of everything that's gone on, but in other European countries, especially if you go to look at the Netherlands for banks, there's a couple of banks there that are doing everything they possibly can to stop people coming into the branches. Because if you think of a branch, it is in a place with high footfall, it's probably big rents, they have to put staff in there, they have to heat it, all that sort of stuff, when really you can do most of the stuff online. So that's a business where they actually have to go out and educate the customer and force them to start using the online tools. So it's in a bank's interest to move people away from the branches and get them using stuff online, even to the point where banks in the UK are starting to take really, really hard things like mortgages and stuff like that, where you would normally go in and sit with people for 2 hours and tick boxes and forms and all that sort of stuff. They're moving all of that stuff online, and it's increasing their profitability. Now, that's a huge challenge, but that's definitely something that they're working on at the moment. One of the most interesting ones, I think, and they're probably one of the smartest brands in the world, is Nike. So Nike sell shoes and clothes and sports gear and all that sort of stuff, and they spend a huge amount of money building their brand up. But about 2 or 3 years ago, they started sort of catching on to this sort of huge technological shift. So what you'll have seen is they've started to develop products where they might have a chip in the shoe that links to an app. They've got the Nike Plus Fuel Band, which is the band that goes around your arm and that links to an app on your phone and gives you lots of data. Now, their CEO has talked numerous times how by the year 2020, it's very likely that Nike might be a technology company rather than a sort of apparel and sports gear company. So that's a shift that's going on at the moment. And what I actually did when I was doing this presentation is like, that sounds like a very sort of big, lofty goal. I went to their website and check it if you're on a tablet or anything there today. And I was expecting to go and see shoes and basketballs and all that sort of stuff that Nike does, but front and center was they wanted me to join the Nike community. So they wanted me to download an app. So the most important part of real estate on their website was not the products they were selling. I think if you look up in the very top left-hand corner, it says shop, and then I could get into the shops. But that's just showing that That's how much of an emphasis that they're putting on community. So then if I scroll down a little bit further down the page, they had all their Twitter pages, their Facebook likes, lots of different communities. So you can see what Nike's trying to do is really grow these communities. And they've got a lot of people there. They've got 40 or 50 odd million just from a quick count. And they're trying to build themselves into a technology company and shift, because they know that if they stay where they're at the moment, they're susceptible to change. And then even thinking in my mind further down Grafton Street, and I was like, okay, Marks and Spencer's, I was like, how are they going to be disrupted? That's not really possible. But if you look, this is probably 4, 5, 6, 7 years down the line, but it's something that you need to be aware of. So if you're in the grocery business, Amazon, who are the big evil bad people who have zero margin and kill all your guys' businesses, but that's what they do. We need to be real about it. They have, for the last 5 or 6 years in Seattle, in the States, have been testing same-day delivery of groceries, and it looked like a very quiet little project that they were doing in one city. That's where they're from, but they actually rolled it out to 2 other cities in California over the last few months. So it looks like maybe Amazon are going to enter the sort of grocery business. And if I was Super Quinn or Tesco's or anybody like that, I'd be terrified by the prospect of that, because they're so mean and tight in what they do. So that is another industry that technology could disrupt massively. And then all the fashion stores. So if you go up and down Grafton Street, there's everybody, Next and Ted Baker and Topman and all that sort of stuff. If you're in that business, you're already starting to see a shift. So the likes of ASOS and Littlewoods and all those companies are already selling a lot of stuff online. So you're being disrupted by those companies online. But the next stage of that is even more interesting. So I was just very interested to see that last week that Enterprise Ireland, who would see hundreds of startups come through their system every year, the one that they named as the one to watch, or the most important startup of them all, was a company started by these fashion graduates that let you go into, you didn't actually have to physically go into the shop. So if somebody was wearing this blue hoodie, they could take a picture of it and it would automatically sync up with a load of blue hoodies online. So you could actually be in a bar and take a picture of somebody's pattern on their dress, and it would start to link you up with shops. So that takes the shop completely, the physical shop completely out of the equation. Now, I'm not saying that's going to be a huge success. I don't know much about the company, but if they've a lot of funding and they're named as the one to watch. So there is huge amounts of money being spent on social commerce and e-commerce by startups, particularly on mobiles at the moment. So I'd be pretty sure that a lot of the retail fashion stores on Grafton Street would definitely get disrupted. And then I tried to take it even a step further. I was like, okay, that's Marks and Spencer's, Vodafone. I was literally going up and down and I couldn't think of any more. And then I was like, okay, the Westbury, so huge big hotel just off Grafton Street, massively disrupted by a site called Airbnb. So anybody here heard of Airbnb? Anybody used it? So not that many people used it, 6, 7. Basically, it is, how do I describe it? So you can have your house on Airbnb, you can have a room in your house on Airbnb, and you essentially become a hotelier or an Airbnb, a B&B host yourself. So if you've got an individual room in your house, you can maybe rent it out for about $100 a night, which is a great way of paying the mortgage. If you've got an apartment, you'll get 200 or 300 euros for the night. So if you think of going to somewhere like New York, where a hotel room is $300-400 for a decent one, which is quite expensive, you can go and rent somebody's spare room in their apartment in New York for about $100-150. Now you're going into somebody's house, so it's completely different. But this is getting huge traction. So I was just saying that I rented my house in Ranelagh for the last 2 weeks on Airbnb. Now it means you have to get out of your house. But since the start of the year, I've personally made $8,000 by renting out my own rooms or part of the house on Airbnb. Now, the reason I'm telling you that number is because I think that $8,000 has literally come straight out of the pockets of hoteliers or Airbnb or B&B hosts or people around the country. So if you're somebody who owns the Westbury or a little hotel or something like that, you need to be aware that that there's sites like this that are driven by technology that are directly taking money out of your business. So an example of this was I'm going to a wedding in 3 weeks' time in Italy, and people are quite skeptical about people spending money on their mobile, but myself and Sean, my best friend, we were saying, okay, we got to go to this wedding. We were sitting having dinner in a restaurant, and he whipped out the Airbnb site, and he booked a €500 penthouse apartment in Verona, where we're going in Italy, for very little money, and he spent €500-600 with a click of a button, and it was all done within 2 minutes on his mobile. So that's money that was taken directly out of a hotel's budget somewhere in Italy. And then just looking at the future, so that's kind of just whizzing through those ones. That's how I think the entire high street is going to be disrupted. It's not all going to happen literally overnight. Shops are not going to close in the same way that HMV did so quickly, but there is disruption there. There's no point walking into your business and saying, right, let's just keep doing the same thing. It doesn't mean that you're dead. It doesn't mean that you're going to go out of business, but you do have to be aware of this huge shift that's happening out there and embrace it as much as you possibly can. Looking at the future, there's stuff like, this is an interesting one. 2 guys that I know who've set up Parcel Motel, and it allows you to essentially, the really annoying thing that happens when you order, this is why I don't order online. I order, then the thing comes to the door, and then I got to go to the post office, and you just don't have time for all that sort of stuff if you've got a busy lifestyle. So you've probably seen these in nearly every petrol station and sort of public areas in Ireland recently. They're a startup, but essentially you can order online, and they deliver to a box in the petrol station, and then you're on your way home and you can go in and grab your delivery. So it makes the process an awful lot easier. I know Google bought a company like this. The name escapes me in the States, but Google and Amazon are very much getting into this space of not next day delivery, which would be used to here in Ireland, but same day delivery, which is massive in the States at the moment, and which is becoming more and more important. So if you think of that you're sitting in your office, or if you're wherever you are, and you can order something, and the same day, by the time you get home, it's going to be in a parcel box for you on your way home. That makes the idea of shopping online way more compelling for me. I'm impatient. I can't wait 2 or 3 days, go to the post office. It's still a little bit of friction. I know a lot of people do. But something like this, where you can order it and see and feel your product that same day, is going to change how people shop online in a massive way, I think. Another example is, this is just looking at the future a little bit, it's a company called Square. So Square, if you think about retail or restaurants or anywhere that's got a till or a cash system, it's the most archaic, annoying system that you could ever come across. So you're printing out physical pieces of paper, handing them to the person. It's really, really old school. You have to match that up with coins and physical cash down below. There has to be a better system, and that system is probably Square, or similar versions that Visa and all those companies are developing. So essentially, you've got an iPad as your till. You can run credit cards through that. People can sign on their phone. But far more interesting, and this is where the real world businesses, if I was you guys, I'd be trying to embrace this sort of technology. This will give you analytics on your customers and tell you exactly what they're doing, where they're coming from, what sort of deals you can offer them. So if you're a coffee shop, you can build your loyalty programs into Square. You can, if you're a small plumber, if you're any sort of small business, you can take payments through your phone. All you need is that tiny little white square thing up at the top, and you can swipe your credit card down through it. So that sort of cashless system, I think, is going to be very interesting. I definitely look into the company called Square, or there's a European equivalent of it as well. Bitcoin is a very interesting one. This is, I think, miles down the road, but the whole idea of virtual currency is something that's going to become much more interesting over the next few years. Bitcoin it's called a peer-to-peer currency. It doesn't exist. There's no coins, there's no notes, there's nothing to it apart from a virtual currency. But it's starting to get a lot of traction over in the States, and I think we're going to move to a point where hopefully we'll have a cashless society. So It's taken an awful long time to happen. The likes of Google Wallets, Visa and MasterCard, PayPal, all these guys are trying to get into this space. But using your smartphone as your wallet has got to be the future. So that's the way that the world is going. You're already seeing stuff like your airline tickets on there, your boarding passes, those sort of items. Hopefully we'll get to a point where it's integrated with Square and your wallets, and the whole thing is one seamless thing. I thought it would have happened by now, but I think it's something that we're definitely going to see over the next 2 to 3 years, sort of accelerating. So virtual currency would be a huge one. And then further down the line, I'm not totally sold on it, but I think it's a very, very interesting area. Google Glass is, you've probably all read about it in the media. It's got huge sort of early adopter appeal. There's lots of apps being built on top of it. So the idea is that you can put on a pair of glasses. I can talk to the glasses, believe it or not. I could say, like, take a picture right now, and it would take a picture of you guys. But more interesting than that, I think, is the repercussions it'll have for commerce and what people are doing in the real world. So if I'm a large shop like Tesco, maybe I can launch an app on Google Glass that feeds me in prices or special offers as I'm walking through a supermarket. There's already the New York Times, Twitter, a lot of people have apps on Google Glass, even though there's only a couple of thousand people using them at the moment. That's something that'll explode in popularity next year. And the sort of, I think where we're at, like I was saying at the start, that we were lucky enough to sort of see Facebook and Twitter and stuff like that coming quite early, and that's how we built our business. If I was starting a business right now, I'd really be interested in this sort of wearable computing space. So at the moment, all the big companies from Google, Apple, Microsoft, and all the big sort of hardware companies are developing smartwatches at the moment and other forms of wearable computing. So what that means is that you're going to be interacting with the internet and objects and stuff like that way more without even knowing it. So you're not actually going to have to physically pull out your phone and push a button. You'll be able to do it by tapping your smartwatch, or your smartwatch should be measuring the amount of steps that you take automatically every day, and there'll be a lot more interaction there. So wearable computing is probably the theme that we're going to see most over the next 3 to 4 years, and that's going to be tied into commerce quite a lot. So really just to kind of wrap up, I was kind of thinking of all the shops, and I think they're all there for disruption, maybe not some as quick as others. The one thing that I was kind of thinking that the only one that I think can't be disrupted is maybe ice creams, or going to buy something physical that you have to eat. I still don't know how they're going to figure out a way for technology to be able to replace that, but the kind of the main point that I don't want to be totally scary, and like probably some of you are thinking like, Jesus, our businesses are in trouble, we need to change. It's not that you need to change what you're doing, it's just that you need to be aware of the key trends that are happening. And if you think back to HMV, how quickly they were disrupted and went out of business, it can happen within 2, 3, 4 years, or quicker in the case of the likes of Kodak. So really just try and be as aware as you can of mobile, because everybody's got a smartphone, everybody's walking around finding information and making purchases on them. Try to obviously be aware of Google and search rankings, which different people are going to talk to you later, because that's still where people go and buy stuff primarily. And in terms of social, Facebook's great. Don't just go and set up a Facebook page and think it's going to change your whole business. You need a much bigger strategy behind it. But the one thing I just really want to reinforce is embrace disruption as much as you can, because it's where the world is headed in terms of technology. Cheers.
Okay, we're going to take some questions. Question for Jeff.
Thanks, Niall. Great presentation, as usual. Just wanted to ask you your opinion on social media platforms. So everyone knows about Facebook, and most of our customers are predominantly on Facebook. But you've got your YouTubes, you've got your Pinterest, you've got Google+, which is an interesting one. and you've got obviously Twitter, etc. Just wondering about your opinion on kind of aside from Facebook, the usefulness of all these other platforms and the role that they may play in the future. So, for instance, Google Plus. There's a big debate out there around what role it's going to play in the social sphere and so on. And it's great for sharing images, etc., etc. Just wondering if you could kind of develop on that one.
So I think the question is just like probably which platforms to choose in social media and which ones are most important. Genuinely, what I see most with brands and businesses is they'll come along and everybody else, the standard is set up a Twitter page, Facebook page, some sort of LinkedIn presence, maybe a Google Plus presence, and not that much YouTube. But they'll end up doing them all very, very averagely, or leaving a couple of them as nearly sort of ghost towns where nothing happens. So what I would say is pick, I think, the two that are most relevant to your business. So if you're, mass market and your Facebook's brilliant, maybe your Twitter might be more relevant, but pick two and do them really, really well rather than doing them all. Now, if you're a big brand and you've lots of budgets and you have somebody to look after each of them, great, do them all and do them really, really well. But I think picking two and focusing on them and sticking with them and building your own community is the key. And then advertising on them is crucial. So the targeting that you can do through Facebook, especially, and Twitter and Google and LinkedIn is phenomenal. So if you've got a business for the first time in history, instead of just putting a big full-page newspaper ad in a newspaper, you can go and target 22 to 24-year-old females who live in Blanchardstown. Like that's never been possible before, and that's massively powerful. So I'd pick two, I'd look at the advertising on them, and then Google Plus, personally, I wouldn't really use for business purposes. I don't see it happening. It's something different, and it definitely has SEO benefits, and there's some reasons to use it, but I wouldn't have it as top of the list of priorities. And the one that I would focus on, where very few people focus on, is YouTube. So YouTube, we probably all go there multiple times every day. It's the second biggest search engine in the world, and it's a place where people go to get a lot of information on products or demos or other elements around products. So it's kind of wide open. So if you think that Google is very, very hard to get to the top of organically, especially with recent updates that they've done, YouTube is way, way easier to get to the top of because there's not as much competition, and video is a lot cheaper to make these days. You're all walking around with a HD camera on your phone, so there's huge opportunity on YouTube is what I'd say. And you can advertise there and get to the top immediately. So YouTube is wide open.
We have a question over here from Nigel.
Hi, Niall. Just a question there. Facebook introduced F-commerce about 2 years ago, and it was purely dismissed as, people are either engaged in a social activity or they're engaged in shopping online. Has that area tended to become blurred over the last couple of years, and how do you see it driving e-commerce forward?
Yeah, so I think there was when they introduced it, everybody was excited and people went and built places to top up your phone and buy everything on Facebook. I don't think that's why people are on Facebook. I would be dubious about that. Where Facebook is massively successful is when you integrate it into your own website. So this is where if you think of Fab, which I showed you, Spotify, Netflix, all these companies that have grown really, really fast have integrated Facebook. So if you go to Etsy, E-T-S-Y, which is a sort of arts and crafts website, I can go on there. And I'm terrible. I'm like all blokes. I don't know what to buy for if I have a friend who's a girl and it's her birthday or something. I have no idea. I can go onto Etsy. I can pull in her Facebook profile and it'll pull down gifts matched for me automatically. So it'll tell me the sort of the colors that she likes, stuff that she's liked on Facebook. So if she's liked, I don't know, pillows or Coldplay or whatever it is, it'll give me something based on her likes and tastes. So I think it's not something that if I'm a small business in Ireland, I'm not maybe going to have the resources and the money to integrate Facebook because you need a developer. But if you're a big e-commerce site, I would be integrating Facebook as much as possible into your website to personalize it.
Great. David.
Hi Niall, thanks for that. A quick question. There's been an explosion around conversations around content and the importance of content, and is it co-created content or are you pushing content? Do you have any particular views on that, and is there any retailer or brand that you've seen has really kind of, I suppose, stepped up and delivered some really innovative ways of managing that?
Yeah, I think content's absolutely essential, but content sort of costs money and it's labor intensive or time resource. I think if you look at I always look at the biggest brands and see how they're doing it. Burberry are brilliant in the fashion space. They create an awful lot of content. The best example in the world is Red Bull. So if you go on to Red Bull, for me, is a content creation company. They happen to sell drinks as well. So they put a person into space this year or last year. I can't remember when it was. Your man who jumped out of the rocket thing. They constantly have stuff on YouTube. They produce their own magazines. They make feature-length films. They're a content machine. They've got their own studio in Hollywood. And they've really used content to bring people into the story of their brand and make you feel as part of it. So content is hugely important, but it does cost money to produce it. So it's great if you're a big brand. You can go out and hire people to make the content for you. But I think going forward, it's vitally important. Like if you're, say, a 100-person organization, I would have one person dedicated to content. Like that's the way you need to be thinking. It's very, very important.
Any more questions? No? Okay, thank you so much. No, that was
Sheila?
Sorry.
We're just wondering, how important do you think Pinterest is for retailers?
The honest answer is I don't know because I don't use it. There's like 7 or 8 girls in the office, and the first thing that they do every morning is go to Pinterest and start sharing stuff. So it's massively useful, but the demographics are very, very skewed. I think it's about 85% female based. So I think it's the only example I have is there's another one called The Fancy, which is a sort of a Pinterest ripoff, and I've invested in a company, and anytime it gets featured on there, he sells a ton of stuff. Like like there's physical sales linked to it, like 300 or 400 units. So I think I would say very important. The genuine answer is I don't know enough about Pinterest personally to comment on it too much, but women are using it very, very actively to look at products that they like online. So that there has to be a link there to people buying stuff.
And what about Instagram then for retail specifically?
I think it's interesting in terms of brand building. What people forget is Instagram is Facebook. So there's I think nearly 200 million people using Instagram now. But you're starting to see when I go to Facebook or Instagram, they're sort of melding together and they're pushing the two into one. So within the next sort of 12, 18 months, Instagram will be part of Facebook anyway. So there's an audience there. The audience is huge and it's very engaged. So I'd definitely be using it, yeah, if it's relevant for you.
Thank you.
How you doing, Niall? I've heard recently that Amazon are moving more towards a model similar to eBay, in that they're realizing that it's very inefficient to have to move product themselves, and they're finding it harder and harder with the margins that are out there to generate profits. Do you see that continuing, or?
Amazon are just the strangest company I've ever come across. I just don't understand what they're doing, but smart people seem to think that they're brilliant. So they are trying to, I think, just mop up the entire ecosystem from start to finish. And then if you look at their profits have been so small, like for the past 5-10 years, but everybody seems to think that there's going to be a moment where they really start switching on the revenue. But I'd be very, very worried about what they're doing to retailers. Like they're absolutely crushing people with an iron fist, across multiple industries. And I think they're here for a very, very long time. I don't know if what they're doing is not ethically correct, but if what they're doing is the correct for small businesses. But it's going to be a struggle for them in the long time. In terms of the eBay model, I'm not totally sure, but even if you look at how worried Google are in terms of what Amazon are doing, people are starting to nearly go to Amazon directly to start looking for product as opposed to going to Google as a starting point. That's where the big battle is, I think, over the next couple of years, is where you go to shop first. And Amazon are trying to make their platform the most important.
Any more questions? Okay. Thank you.
Cheers.